Hello, so my name is Paul, and today I want to talk about Jesus as the Lamb of God, as John talked about in John chapter 1, verse 29. And the verse is, it says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." Well, that statement seems fairly straightforward as we think about the Israelite sacrificial system and animal being offered as a sacrifice. It doesn't, on the surface, it makes a lot of sense, but when you actually dig deeper, it has a lot more nuance to it, and it really doesn't mean what we would normally think is a sin offering or that kind of offering. So there's three possible explanations really that we can explore when we say, or when John said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." The first is Jesus as a sin offering or a guilt offering. The next is Jesus is the scapegoat during the Day of Atonement. And the third is Jesus as the paschal Passover lamb as celebrated during the Passover. So when we look at the sin or the guilt offering, there's actually 5 different main offerings that the Israelites would offer on a regular basis, and those were the burnt offerings, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. So the first 3 of those offerings had nothing to do really with atonement for sin. They were more acts of worship. But the sin and the guilt offering are basically one of the same. The sin offering is more of unintentional sin, and the guilt offering is more of knowing that you've sinned and making offering and atonement for that sin. But in each case, it's not a lamb that's being offered. It's typically a bull that's offered. In the case of a guilt offering, there's a bull if you were a priest, and then if you're just a leader of Israel, it's a male goat a year old. And then if you're a common person, it's actually a female goat and not a lamb. So we can kind of eliminate the sin or the guilt offering based on the type of animal that is sacrificed. So then we come to the Day of Atonement, and during the Day of Atonement, we kind of see a number of normal type offerings being offered at the same time, as well as a couple special ones. So during the Day of Atonement, the priest would offer a bull to start off by offering atonement for himself so that he would be worthy to perform the entire ceremony. Then he would also offer offerings such as a ram as a burnt offering for himself, and then he would put on his priestly garments, which were called the holy garments, and then he would he would be given 2 goats. He would cast lots, and one would fall for a sin offering sacrifice, and the other goat, which is known as the scapegoat, wouldn't be sacrificed at all. The priest would lay his hands on the head of the goat. He would then send the goat off, and the laying on the hands of the goat is a way to impart the sin of the people on the goat, and that goat would then be released into the wilderness to bear the sin of the people. But again, during this whole thing, there is no lamb offered in this ritual or sacrifice. It's a bull, 2 rams, and 1 goat that's sacrificed and 1 goat that is released into the wilderness. So again, we don't have a lamb, so it kind of eliminates the Day of Atonement from our discussion. So then the third type is the paschal lamb during the Passover celebration. And so as when the Israelites have been in slavery for 400 plus years, God sends Moses into Egypt to convince Pharaoh through 10 plagues that are designed to convince Pharaoh to let the people go. Well, he doesn't. For the first 9, he doesn't let his people go, or God's people go, and then as he's going, he sometimes he'll say, yes, go, take your people, and then he'll change his mind. Well, the 10th plague is that God is going to kill every firstborn son in Egypt. That includes Egyptians and Israelites. And for most of the plagues, they only affected the Egyptians, but for this 10th plague, it was going to be pretty much anybody. It was going to be anybody that didn't celebrate the Passover. So the Passover was a week long, 8 days. They would then take on the first day they would select a lamb, and they would prepare the lamb all week, but they would eat nothing but unleavened bread during the 7 days leading up to the Passover event. And on the 8th day, what they did is they came together, they slaughtered the lamb, and they cooked it, and they took the blood and they smeared the blood on the doorposts and the door frame of their house. And this was a way to mark their house as being one of God's people. And as the angel of death passed over the house and saw the blood of the lamb, instead of killing the firstborn son, he would just simply go on by. So all of the Egyptians' sons were killed, but the Israelites' sons were saved. And here we see that this sacrifice is specifically a lamb. Now there are occasions where a goat is offered, but the primary sacrifice is that of a lamb. So again, here the lamb is chosen on the 8th day. The lamb is slaughtered on the 8th day, cooked, ate. The blood is sprinkled on the doorstep or the doorposts. And so here God commands then that the Israelites observe this Passover celebration once a year on the same day of every year. And it's all to be in remembrance of what God has done to bring them out of Egypt. Now, when we come back to Jesus and we look at how Jesus is the Passover lamb in John's statement, and what makes that statement with the Passover, is that a few things. The first is that Jesus is crucified on the day of the Passover, and specifically he is crucified on the 8th day, which is the day that they would slaughter the lamb. Jesus enters Jerusalem on the first day of the 8-day Passover celebration. That's kind of him declaring himself as that Passover lamb. The other thing is that Jesus actually, on the day he was crucified, took the 12 and he celebrated the Passover with them, which was his custom throughout. But during this specific Passover celebration, as he was with the 12, he changed the Passover celebration so that instead of a Passover, we now see that it's like a Holy Communion type celebration, what we would be more familiar with today, where Jesus declared that the bread and the wine was his body. And he uses language much like God did during the original Passover, and he tells them that every time that they do this new communion is that they are actually doing this in remembrance of him and what he has done, just like God said, do the Passover in remembrance of how I brought you out of Egypt. Now Jesus is saying, do Holy Communion as you remember me being sacrificed on the cross. So the third thing we see is that, like the lamb, none of Jesus' bones were broken. And this is actually prophesied in the Psalm as well. But we can see that there's these three main things that are done. There's a few other minor details, like the Passover lamb's blood was mixed with hyssop, and Jesus is offered hyssop as he is dying on the cross. But these are more minor things that may or may not really have too much of a significance. Thank you.